Hello everyone. Now that we have seen a few Spring Boot annotations on paper at least, let's do a little bit of an exercise just to see how we use those annotations for our benefit, right? And uh, before we deep dive into each of these application layers, let's just do a little bit of an exercise to get ourselves up to speed with these annotations. Right, so I'm just going to create a service class here. So this is a REST controller class, as you can see, right? I'm just going to create a service class as well. I'll call it training service, right? And I need to now call this service class from the controller class, right? So this is typically the flow, right? That, like I said, that the controller will pass on the request to the service class, and the service class will actually do the processing, if any, right? So I have created this service class, and let's just create a simple function that says say hello, right? So I've created this simple function called say hello in the training service class, and this function actually returns the same text that we were originally returning from the controller. Oops, sorry. So I don't want it to be returned from the controller, but I actually want that request to be processed by the training service class now. So what do I have to do? The first thing I need to do here is I need to inject the training service. Right? I'll create a reference object for training service. And what I'll do is I'll replace this text and I'll say training service dot say hello. Right? So this is the function that I have written. And so we're going to call this service class function now. And let's see if this works. Right? So I'm just going to start the application once again. Right? And let's quickly go to the browser. So I'll just pull the browser here and we'll do the same thing, localhost 8080 v1 and hello, right? And it doesn't give us anything here. Let's see if we have something in the logs. So you see there's a null pointer exception here. Why is this null pointer exception coming here? It's probably because we forgot to annotate this with @service. So if you don't annotate the class, Spring Boot doesn't know that it needs to create a bean for this particular class, right? So when you inject this bean over here, Spring Boot will not inject it because it doesn't know of a bean by the name training service. It was never asked to create a bean by that name, right? So now that we have annotated it with @service, let's quickly restart and see if it's working now. Okay, so we have started the app. Let's hit it again. Oops, it didn't work this time either. So it still is null. So what have we got wrong this time, right? So you remember we had another annotation that we were using to basically wire the instance, and it was @auto wired. Right? So we have to tell Spring Boot that please auto wire this instance, this class instance, or a bean by that name into the training controller bean, right? So that's how Spring Boot comes to know that this bean, which by the way existed this time, but it needs to be auto wired or it needs to be injected into the training controller, right? I hope this makes sense. So I'll just restart the service once again, just trying to do the things step by step so you understand what could go wrong when you write your own applications, right? Okay, so the service is now started. I'll just hit the endpoint once again, and there you go. It is working, right? So now we have this message coming actually from the service class and not from the controller, right? But what is this message? It says field injection is actually not recommended, right? So basically, there are two types of wiring that we can do. One is this setter based injection, which is this at the rate auto wired annotation, and the other is called the constructor based injection, right? So what the constructor based injection says is, instead of auto wiring it using this auto wired annotation, why don't you pass this in the constructor of training controller itself? So that's another way of doing it. Right? And if your browser is, if your editor, sorry, is smart enough, it will give you a way to fix it. So you see, I just clicked on this bulb and it says create a constructor that has this training service wired. So I'll just select this option and see what changes here. It created a constructor which is wiring this training service class inside this. So the at the rate auto wire annotation is gone now. You don't have to have the at the rate auto wire annotation, as you can see. So this should also, we can actually remove this import as well, just to keep things clean, right? So I'll just restart this service once again, just to make sure that things are working as expected, right? The service is restarted. I'll just quickly go to the browser to make sure that it is still working, and it does work, right? Which basically means that we now have an endpoint which calls a service class, right, using a constructor injection, right? So this is what we call a constructor injection, where you don't use the at the rate auto wire annotation, but instead when this bean is getting created, training controller bean, that's when this constructor will get called and it will inject this training service instance in the training controller instance, right? I hope that is clear as well.